All right, Rabbi, good morning, a good tevach, a good yar. This is Baruch Hashem Neschus. To continue Eretz Hashem now, in the uninterrupted time ahead, with Eretz Hashem, our journey through Daf Yomi, continuing by Basra, begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning share. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for Tishrei, Dr. Linda Weinberg, for dedicating all the Shir Midrashos this month in loving memory of her husband of 53 years, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Peretz Moshe ben Avraham David, in commemoration of his fourth yahrzeit, and Avraham and Shaindy Kelman, in memory of their parents, Jerome and Bernice Kelman, and Alexander and Friderica David. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the Neshamos have an aliyah, the families in Nechama, and of course, as always, we dedicate our learning. We dedicate our learning in Eretz Hashem in the schos of the return of our hostages, the success of our precious and holy soldiers, and halavai, a year of shalom and besoros tovos for all of Klal Yisrael. We also good. All right. Well, so with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Kuf Chaf Dalid 124. We left off on the bottom of Kuf Chaf Gimel Amud Beis 123b, 5 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, we are still very much immersed in the topic of Nachla, of inheritance, hence the Parakesh Nochlin, and specifically focusing on the concept on the entitlement of the firstborn. So we know that Halacha L'maisa, again, a Bachar gets Pishnayim, a Bachar gets a double portion. So we had a Brisa that highlighted this dynamic, and the Brisa was talking about the idea. Essentially, the Brisa said like this. The Brisa said that a Bachar, let me just tell you the Brisa again outside. A Bachar gets Pishnayim on Zra Lechayim and Keva. Right? In other words, the illustration we used yesterday was Avraham died, Avraham was a Kohen. He left behind 2 sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak was the Bachar, for illustration purposes. Yitzchak was the Bachar. So what happened now? So again, if Avraham left in his possession any of the Kohanic gifts, Yitzchak, his son, would get a double portion in those portions. Now the truth is, the Gemara gave even a bigger chiddush, makire kahuna, all that, but we don't have to get into that right now. The Brisa then went on also to discuss the idea about mukdashim, consecrated items. A bachar also gets double portion. The Gemara defined that. What is that talking about? Kachin kalim. And then the third case, which is what we're going to focus on now, is the case of muskeres biyad acherim o shahaysa ruah ba'afar. So for example, let's say Avram had a cow, and his cow was leased out to someone else, right? Or rented out to someone else, or was just grazing on its own. And after Avram died, before the estate was divided up, the cow, Mazel Tov, gave birth. So Yitzchak the Bachar gets Pishnayim in that. Now I will say, that topic is what we're going to spend the bulk of today on. That's a totally different topic. Now what that topic has to do is as follows. Let me just highlight this outside, and then we'll go back to it inside. In general, right, so what we'll call it firstborn portion, Pishnayim 101, is that what does a Bachar get Pishnayim in? What does he give Pishnayim? Muchzak, which up until now has always meant that which the father actively owned at the time of his death. But anything that is Ro'i means entitled, right? Any entitlements, a Bachar doesn't get Pishnayim. Now, we're going to try to have to define what does that mean, something entitled. So for example, where is this going to come up? Let's say after Father Avraham dies, there is shevach, there is some type of increase or some type of benefit that accrues to his property, but it occurs what we call me'eleh. It occurs by itself. It's not roi. So in other words, is that roi or is that muchzak? That's going to be our fundamental question we're going to delve into now. Okay, so with that, let's go back. 5 lines up from the bottom. So we just did half of yesterday's daf in 3 minutes. Okay, incredible. It's kind of like when my wife asks me to tell her over the drasha, right? And I say to her like a minute and a half. She's like, wonderful. So why did it take 19 minutes in shul? All right, that's fine. And so the Gemara says as follows. So hiniach lahen avian. So para muchrachas umuskeres biyad acherim o shahaysa roa ba'afar. V'yalda b'charnal tal pishnayim. Suppose it's now last case in the Brisa. So now what happens over here? Father Avram died, and he left behind a cow. The cow was leased out to others or rented out to others, or for that matter, again, it was just grazing on its own in the pasture. Now what happened? V'yalda. So the timeline of events here is very important, right? What's time of events? Time of events was Avraham died. At the time that Avraham died, what was the status of the cow? What was the status? Right? Either rented, leased, right? Or just grazing on its own, but pregnant. The cow gives birth after Avraham died, but before the estate was divided up. So now what's the shaila? So now, K'nai Nahara, there's a cow and there's a calf, there's a baby. So the shaila, so now what the Brisa says is, when Yitzchak takes his portion as Bechar Pishnayim, he gets Pishnayim in that calf as well. So the Gemara says, Bechar Nota Pishnayim. So the Gemara says, okay, Hashta, Muchrachas Umuskeres Delav Bershusa Demara Dido Kaima. Amrit Shakal Roa Shakal. So we'll say, so now the Gemara says like this. If you notice, there's two cases here. Case number one is where the cow was leased out. So obviously, if the cow was leased out, which means it wasn't in Avram's possession at the time that he died, and yet even in that case, when the cow gives birth, Yitzchak, the firstborn son, is going to get Pishnayim, then Roa Ba'efra Miboy, then obviously if the cow is out grazing on its own, of course Yitzchak is going to get a double portion. What's the Chiddush? HaKamash Malon, Temuchrachas Umuskeres Dumya Deroa Ba'efar. So what do you see from here? What is the Brisa teaching us? That a cow that is rented out or leased out is similar to one that is grazing in the pasture. Ma Roa Ba'efar, so here it is. Ma Roa Ba'efar Shivcha Dememela Ka'asi V'lo Ka'chasri Ba'mazona. So just like when the cow is going ahead and grazing out in the pasture, Shivcha Dememela Ka'asi. So the improvements or enhancements, right, come on their own, and no one's out any money. Because since the cow is out grazing, so therefore again, no one has to actively feed it. Type of Kuf Chav Dalid. Af muchraches umuskeres shivcha dememela kaasi tolo chaser b'mizoni. So too, when the cow is leased out or rented out, someone else is maintaining it, right? And therefore again, the shevach, the improvement comes memela, just comes on its own. And again, it hasn't cost any of the brothers anything. So we'll say, so here is the chiddush. Here is what is being espoused. That if after the death of the father, before the estate has been divided up, if property improves on its own, in other words, so no one invested any time or capital in the improvement of the estate, but the estate improved on its own, a Bechar gets Pishnayim of that improvement, which is another way of saying that improvement is not called Roi, but rather what is that improvement called? Muchsak. But again, there's two criteria that have to be in place. Number one, it's what we call Shivcha Memela Ka'asi. It improved on its own. No one did anything. Like the cow gave birth on its own, and no one had to spend money on this improvement. If those two criteria are satisfied, then in addition to all the other property that obviously the father owns at the time of his death, that the Bechar gets Pishnayim, the Bechar will get Pishnayim in this improvement as well. Incredible. So the Gemara says, who is this? Whose opinion is this? Because as we're going to both say, what's always exciting about Gemara? You're like, I have no idea. I'm waiting to find out still. Right? I've been here for years. I just want to say, no, it's exciting about Gemara. So what's exciting about Gemara is sometimes the Gemara will present a fact, right? And then it turns out that fact, which sounded so simple, so pashat that everyone agrees with, is in fact subject of tremendous machlokes. See, here we go. The Gemara says, okay, so now you've just gone ahead and espoused an idea. The idea is that if improvement occurs to the estate and the improvement incurred on its own, and there was no outlay of cash by any of the other brothers, then a Bechar gets Pishnayim of that improvement. So the Gemara says, tell me, whose opinion is that? Money. Here we go. Rebbe. It's Rebbe. This time, Yabosai, here it is. The Brisa says, Ein Bechar notal Pishnayim b'shevach sheshavchu nechasim la'achar misas avihen. The Rabbanon say that a Bechar does not get Pishnayim in any estate appreciation that occurs after the death of the father. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is in the short lines, the intermediate. There's like wide lines on top, wide lines on the bottom, short lines in the middle. Right in the middle of those short lines, across from the Gilyon Hashas, b'shevach sheshavchu memela. So let's listen to this. This is the position of the Rabbanon. Essentially, what the Rabbanon say is as follows. The Rabbanon say that the Bechar's Pishnayim is calculated at the time of the death of the father. The moment the father dies, whatever the estate has in that moment, that's what the Bechar gets Pishnayim. Any changes that occur afterwards, whether those changes occur by themselves or whether those changes occur because someone else did something, the Bechar does not get Pishnayim in that. So that's the Lashon over here. Ein Bechar notel Pishnayim, b'shevach sheshavchu nechasim la'achar misas aviyan. A Bechar does not get a double portion in any estate appreciation that occurs after the death of the father. Rabbi says, Omer Ani, I say, Bechor notel pishnayim b'shevach sheshavchu nechasim la'achar misas avihan. So Rabbi says, I disagree. And I think a Bechor can get pishnayim even in a state appreciation which occurred after the death of the father. However, but for example, but Rabbi says, even I agree that halacha l'maisa, if the brothers improved the estate after the death of the father, then the Bechar does not get pishnayim in that. In other words, which is another way of saying, Rebbe holds, I hold that the Bechar gets pishnayim in estate appreciation when, if the estate appreciated, number one, on its own, and number two, there was no outlay of cash by the brothers. So I'll give you like a simple example. Let's say Father Avraham dies, right? And Yitzchak and Yishmael, the sons, Yitzchak gives the Bechar. Yishmael goes ahead and builds a, I don't know, or puts on an addition to the house, right? And then they end up selling the house. So remember again, so in that case, it's clear Yishmael improved the property himself. So Yitzchak is not going to get pishnayim in the proceeds from that improvement. That doesn't make any sense. But Lamaisa, if the value of the real estate went up, or some other type of appreciation occurred for which neither brother did anything, Rabbi will say that's what we call shevach d'memela ka'asi, improvement that came on its own. Rabbi holds that Allah l'maisa Yitzchak will share in that. So we'll say, so I just want to point out, this is the raging dispute. The Rabbanon say that a Bechar does not share in any, does not get pishnayim in any estate appreciation that occurs after the death of the father. Rebbe holds he does, as long as the improvement came on its own. Next, Yarshu Shtarchov, listen to this. What happens if when Avraham died, Father Avraham died, Avraham had lent money to Reuven. So now again, there's $1 million loan that's coming due, that is due to Avraham. So what's the halach? So now obviously Avraham dies, Yitzchak and Yishmael, right, stand to inherit. So what's the halacha? Yarshu Shtarchov, Bechar notel pishnayim. So ultimately again, the Bechar gets pishnayim. Right, so the Bechar gets a double portion. Yotza alei and Shtarchov, this is the opposite case. What happens if Avraham died and Avraham owed money? Right, so case number one is where Avraham died and Avraham was owed money, right? He was the lender. So now halacha l'maisa, the Bechar will get pishnayim of the proceeds of the loan. What happens if Avraham died and Avraham owes money? Right? So the Gemara says yatsa alei and shtarchov. So Bechar no same pishnayim. So this is an interesting halacha, very interesting halacha. So we'll say, so now obviously the debts of Avraham passed down to his estate. So now Avram's estate has to pay back the debt. Avram's children have to pay back their father's debt. So interesting enough, what the Gemara is highlighting over here is the same way that a Bechar gets pishnayim of inheritance, he also inherits pishnayim of any outstanding debts. So Yadzlai and Shtarchov, Bechar no same pishnayim. Now here's what's interesting. Here, we'll say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. So this is actually the first wide line. Actually, before we get to that, look at the previous Rashi, the last Rashbam in the short lines. Yarshu Shtarchov, Hainu Milva Bishtar. So we'll say, so the Rashbam points this out over here, and this is very important. We're obviously talking about loans that are recorded in documents. Undocumented loans are, none of this stuff applies, because undocumented loans, generally unsupported loans, the estate is not going to be chayiv for. So this is a milva b'shtar. The Rashbam says, "Hainu milva b'shtar bechar notel pishnayim dechevan demuchsak b'shtar va'pi hashtar govenas hamilva haru ki'ilu hashtar hishbiach dainu nechasim sheshavchu memela." So again, we're going to get into this a little bit more. Now here's what's interesting about say is that I would have thought before this discussion that a loan is considered to be what? Roi, not muchsak. So what's interesting about, and therefore again the Bechar shouldn't get anything, this is what the Rashbam is highlighting. The Rashbam says, when you have a loan recorded in a document, that is like muchzak, which makes sense, right? Which makes sense. In other words, it's not although it is something that is owed because it is secured. Because it is secured, halacha will view it as muchzak, and therefore a bechar gets pishnayim. Bechar gets pishnayim in it. Okay. Now, we'll say, on the other hand, now look at the next Rashi. Am yatzalin shtarcho, first wide line. Shechayv avim ma'acherim milsa ba'an pei nafshehi v'divrei hakol afilu below yar shtarcho mari. So we'll listen to this. If, on the other hand, the estate owes money, the bechar is going to have to go ahead and pay a double portion. Now, watch this. V'im amar eini no sin ve'eini no tel. What happens if the bechar says, you know what? I yield my pishnayim right. I yield my pishnayim right. Right? I don't need to inherit a double portion, and I don't want to be on the hook for a double portion of paying debts. Then what's the halacha? Rashai. He's allowed to. Take a look at the Rashbam. Bim Amar Eini Notel Pishnayim Mikol Yerushas Avi. Third white line. Shahareni Mochel Chilek Bechora Ve'etal Chilek Kipashat. Ulefichach lo Shalin Milva Pishnayim Elakinegin Ma'asheni Notel Rashai. So we'll say this is very interesting. Saloch Lamais again. Remember when the Bechar gives up his pishnayim, he's not giving up Yerusha, right? He'll still inherit like a regular brother. What he's doing is he's giving up his double portion. He's not giving up his double portion. So interestingly enough, because this is a benefit, therefore he has the right to yield the benefit. Now again, that goes both ways. So the same way he won't inherit the double portion, he also won't be achroi, responsible for a double portion of repayment as well. See, well, more about that. So he has the ability to yield that right. Good. So we'll say, let's analyze this. So the point over here is, going back to our primary discussion, we have a fundamental machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rebbe, namely about what happens if Avraham dies and the estate appreciates on its own, right? The simplest example of this is the one we had in the Brisa. Reuven died, he left behind a pregnant cow, right? And the cow gives birth Avraham dies, and he left behind the pregnant cow, and now the cow gives birth after Avraham died. So the shaila is, does Yitzchak his Bechar get the double portion in that calf or not? That is what we call Shevach or Shivcha de Mamela Kasi, appreciation that came on its own. Rebbe says, yes. Bechar gets the double portion of that. The Rabbanon say, absolutely not. So now let's go deeper. My time out the Rabbanon. So we'll say, let's try to understand the logic behind each of these particular opinions. So my time out the Rabbanon. What's the Rabbanon's logic? Amar Kara, the pasuk says, lo seis lo pishnayim. So the pasuk says, you give the Bechar a pishnayim. Lo seis lo matana karye rachmana. So the Torah refers to double portion of a bechor as a matana. Ma matana ademati liyade. So we'll say, so just like again, right? The halacha is, in order for you to give a gift, what has to happen? As the giver, in order to give the gift, what has to happen? You have to own it. Right? This works by everyone except the government. Right? Government has the ability to just give stuff out, right? But otherwise, the way it works in real life is that halacha l'maisa, in order for you to give something, you have to first have possession of it. Right? So l'maisa, so the Gemara says like this: Ma matana ad matya liyadeh. Just like a matana only applies if the nosein, if the giver has possession of it. Af chelik bechora adimat yeliyadeh. So too again, in order for a father to convey pishnayim to his son the bechar, the father has to have possession of it. So therefore, the Rabbanan say again. So we'll say it's a simple svara. A simple svara that halacha l'maisa pishnayim is called a matana. It's called a matana. So just like a matana, in order, if I want to give you a gift, I have to possess the item I'm going to give you. Otherwise, I can't give a matana if I don't have it. So too, again, a father can only convey pishnayim if halacha l'maisa he has it in his possession. When? At the time of his death. If it's not in his active possession at the time of his death, he can't give pishnayim. If you take a look, by the way, at the Rashbam for just a moment, it's like the middle of the white lines. Rashbam says, "Adamat yiliyadeh." Dinosein iniyochol litna lacherim de'ein adam makne davar shala bali olam. You can't convey ownership of something that does not yet exist. So the same way, if I want to give you a gift, I can't gift you something that I don't currently possess. So to say the Rabbanon, Pishnayim is called the matana, and therefore a father cannot give his firstborn son a double portion in something he doesn't yet possess. Therefore, Pishnayim, the din of Pishnayim only devolves upon property actively held and owned by the father at the time of his death. That's the logic of, excuse me, that is the logic ultimately again of the Rabbanon. The Rebbe says, Rebbe Omer, Amar Kra, Pishnayim. Rebbe says, look, the double portion is called Pishnayim. What is that? A double portion. Makish, Chelik Bechor, the Chelik Pashat. So what do you see from here? You see that the Chelik of the Bechar is compared to the Chelik of a regular brother, right? Because again, what do we call the Chelik of a Bechar? Pishnayim, double portions, which means we look at what a regular brother gets, and he gets double. Now again, whole machlok is about how exactly we measure out Pishnayim, but not for now. So therefore, the Torah equates the Bechar's portion to a regular brother's portion. Machilik pashat afagav delamat liyodei, avchilik bechora afagav delamat liyodei. So we'll say, so now remember again, how does it work with a pashat? A regular brother, what does a regular brother inherit? What does he inherit? Everything. Everything, right? We'll say, remember, when, let's say for example, just as another example, let's say Avraham died. Avram's the father, he died. He left behind two sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. But it happened to be that oldest child was a daughter, right? Sarah. So what's the halacha? So there's no Bechar. So who inherits Avram now that he died? Who inherits him? Yitzchak and Yishmael. How do they split the inheritance? 50-50. What do they inherit? Sorry. What do they inherit? They inherit everything. Ra'oi, muchzak, they get everything. So Rebbe says, the chelik of a Bechar is compared ultimately again to the chelik of a pashat. Right? And therefore, again, whatever laws govern the chiluk of a pashat govern the laws of a bechar. Now, that is not a totally comprehensively true statement, because even Rebbe will agree that of course there are distinctions, because we're going to see Rebbe also subscribes to the distinction between ra and muchzak. The point that Rebbe is making over here is, to a certain degree, at least to a certain level, the chiluk of the bechar mirrors the chiluk of the pashat. And therefore, again, just like the pashat, we'll go ahead. just like the pashat, we'll go ahead and halacha l'maisa, go ahead and acquire. Just like the pashat will acquire shevach, improvement that comes on its own. So to the bechar will acquire ultimately improvement that comes on its own. Excuse me. So Gemara says as follows. So therefore, machilik pashat avagav lo mat liyadei. Just like the pashat will go ahead and will acquire, even from things that he has not yet, that are not yet in the father's possession. So to the chelik of the bechora, things that are not yet in the father's possession at the time that he died, i.e. appreciation that comes after the death of the father, the bechor will also go ahead and acquire. Take a look at the Rashban for just a moment. Machilik pashat avagav lo mat liyadei dechala roi shebaolam haben yoresh mi'aviv daha lo ikri yerusha matana denema einanoto pasha. So again, so we'll say, so therefore it turns out that the fundamental machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanon is based on the following idea. The Rabbanon hold that Pishnayim is called a matana, and therefore again, just like in order to give a matana, you have to have possession of it in order to give it. So in order for the father to give Pishnayim, he has to have it at the time of his death in order for the bechor to take a double portion. Therefore again, any appreciation that occurs later on, halacha l'maisa, the bechor will not share in it. Rebbe, on the other hand, holds that no, Pishnayim is compared to regular Yerusha. And just like regular Yerusha, right, a regular son will inherit any appreciation that occurs on its own, so to the Bechar will get Pishnayim in any appreciation that occurs on its own. Incredible. And Abba says, so now we know how this is going to work. So now each one is going to ask the other what they do with the other's pasuk. So the Gemara says, V'Rabbanon nami haksiv Pishnayim. What do the Rabbanon do with the phrase Pishnayim, right, that Rebbe uses to teach me that the chelik of the Bechar, or the chelik of the Bechar is like the chelik of the Pashat? Hahu l'meisvei le'achad mitzra. This is very interesting. To teach me that the Bechar gets his double portion on one border. Now listen, what does that mean? When the Bechar gets his double portion, so you might say, he doesn't have a choice where he gets it. So therefore, if the brothers say, you know what, okay, Bechar, we'll give you one portion on the south side and one portion on the north side. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, no. What it teaches us is that halacha l'maisa. Thank you so much. Thank you. So the Gemara says as follows. So the Gemara says, what, according to the Rabbanon, thank you. What do they go ahead and use the pasuk for? So that teaches us, P9 teaches us that the Bachar's two portions resemble each other. Meaning what? That he gets contiguous property. That when he gets a piece, which again intuitively makes sense, but you still need to be told this. In other words, it's not just that he gets two portions, but rather he gets two portions that are contiguous. Okay? Rabbi Nami Haksiv Loseslo. So what does Rabbi do? Remember again, the Rabbanan use Loseslo to teach us that Yerusha is a matana. What does Rabbi use Loseslo to teach us? Shem Amar Eini Notel ve'Eini Rashai. So we'll say that teaches us that here's what's interesting. That's what? That yes, Yerusha is a matana. But doesn't mean that Yerusha is a matana. That just like if somebody wants to give you a matana, you have the ability to what? To say no thank you. Say no thank you. You could say no to a gift. Ultimately, again, so therefore, again, so too a Bachar has the ability to say, Eini notel ve'eino rashai. I'm not taking pishnayim, and I don't want to be responsible for a double portion for the debts either. Okay, so beautiful. So we'll say, therefore, halacha l'maisa, this is our fundamental machlokes, Rebbe and the Chachamim, or Rebbe and the Rabbanon, ultimately about appreciation that occurs on its own to the estate after the death of the father, but before the division amongst the sons. Does the Bachar get Pishnaim in this? Rabbanon, no. Rebbe, yes. Now we've seen their respective positions and where they glean those respective positions from. A couple of more cases. Amar Papa, Dikla va'alim, Ara va'asik sirton. So we'll say, what about the following cases? So Papa says, let's say again, Avraham dies, and he left behind a palm tree. Left behind the palm tree. And after his death, but before the division of the estate, the palm tree gets bigger. All it means, if you look at the Rashbam, 4 lines from the bottom of Olim, Shenis'ava achrekein, vehekhein hiniach lahem ara v'aska. So we'll say, so for example, the palm tree just got bigger, right? So because it got bigger, bless you, therefore it became more valuable. Or, for that matter, he left him a field, and the field became more valuable. In other words, sirton literally means it acquired more dirt, like more dirt washed up on it, and therefore the field just became thicker. So these are cases of appreciation, but if you notice over here, the appreciation is a little bit different. What's different about these cases? The object is the same, there's just more of it, right? Contrast that with the case of the cow that gives birth, right? Before it was a pregnant cow, now there's two cows. So Rav Papa says like this, in a case of where Avram died, left behind the palm tree got bigger. Or the ground, the earth became thicker, the kuli amalo pligi dishakal. It's very interesting. Everyone agrees that the Bachar gets pishnayim. Everyone agrees, even the Rabbanon. Why? Ki pligi, so where does Machlokes come up with? Bechafura v'hava shuvli. So for example, again, where let's say Ruvain died, and there were shoots, right, in the ground, and those shoots became ears of grain. Or shaluffi v'havi tamri. Or when Ruvain died, there were blossoms, and the blossoms became dates. So we'll say, Demar Savar Shivcha Demamela, Umar Savar Ishtani. Rabbi would hold that Allah Chalamaisa, this is called appreciation that comes on its own, and therefore, again, Allah Chalamaisa, the Bechar should get Pishnaim, and the Rabbanon will say, no, it's fundamentally changed. So I just want to point out what's happened over here. So just to take a step back, the machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rabbi is in a case of where the estate improved, but that improvement really, the estate evolved. The estate changed. Right? So that's why the easiest example of this is Ruvain died leaving behind a pregnant cow, and now Kanai Hara Mazel Tov, the cow gave birth. So now there's a fundamental change. So Rebbe will say that's called improvement that comes on its own. And Halacha L'maisa again, the Bechar gets Pishnayim in that. The Rabbanon will say absolutely not. Absolutely not. The Bechar gets Pishnayim in the estate as it was left by the father at the time of his death. What Rav Papa is pointing out over here is everyone would agree that in the case of the palm tree that gets bigger, that the Bechar shares in the appreciation by the time they get to divide up the estate. Why? What's the logic there? It's the same tree. It's the same tree. The machlokes only comes about when the item in question has fundamentally changed, right? So the shoots turn into ears of grain, or the blossoms turn into dates, where there already, again, there's something different that's occurred. That's where we'll have the machlokes, Rabbi and the Rabbanon. So just an interesting case. So that machlokes is still there. We don't know the resolution of it. It's still holding. We're going to see it tomorrow, Meretz Hashem. So it's kind of still hovering there, but it's just important to understand that in the case of where the item itself is the same, there's just more of it, Everyone agrees that Bachar gets Pishnayim in that. Incredible. Amar Rabba. So we're not finished yet. Amar Rabba Barchana, Amar Reb Chia. Asa Kedivrei Rabbi Asa. So this is great. It's really great. So Rabba Barchana says, Reb Chia. If you paskin like Rabbi, shkoyach. Okay, good. Asa Kedivrei Chachamim, Asa. And if you pass like the Chachamim, it's good. Like, if only all of Yiddishkeit could be like this, right? Be much easier. I mean, some people do live like this, right? But Lamaisa, right? So I'll say, so again, if you pass like Rebbe, good. If you pass like the Chacham, good. Why? What's the logic over here? Mesapkele. So okay, so Mesapkele. So I'll say, obviously, Rabba in the name of Rabbi Chia is not sure how we paskin. Now, here's what's interesting. What's at the root of this doubt? He's not sure. Mesapkele I halacha k'Rebbe mechavero v'lo mechaverov, o halacha k'Rebbe mechavero v'afilu mechaverav. So I will say this is fascinating. There is the Rashbam points out over here that there is a Gemara in Maseches Eruvin, and the Gemara essentially says that the halacha follows Rebbe. Now there's two different gersals of that Gemara. One opinion says it's halacha k'Rebbe mechavero, which means whenever somebody is disputing Rebbe, the halacha always follows Rebbe. But when there is a majority opinion disputing Rebbe, the halacha follows the majority opinion. So we'll say, so that's over here. So do we say halacha k'Rebbe mechavero, right? When Rebbe is disputing one other person, or do we also say halacha k'Rebbe mechaverav, even when he's disputing friends? Say, by the way, it's such a beautiful lashon over here, right? That when Rebbe disputes, when Rebbe disputes someone, it's always chavero or chaverav, right? I always say, how do you know the distinction between a machlokes l'shem shamayim and a machlokes shelo l'shem shamayim when it comes to disputes with other Jews? How do you know if it's a true machlokes for the sake of heaven or not? If you love the other person who you are arguing with, if you still feel he's your chaver, even though you have a vehement disagreement, maybe even an irreconcilable agreement, if you could still love the Jew you are disagreeing with, that's a machlokes l'shem shamayim. But if at the end of the day he's no longer your chaver, but he's your sworn enemy because you disagree with him, that is not a machlokes l'shem shamayim. That's just machlokes. So the Gemara says as follows. So Rabbi himself is not Shanabose. So now remember, in this case over here, so Rabbi is disputing the Rabbanon. So Rabbi himself is not sure, do we paskin that the halacha follows Rabbi mechavero, and therefore in this case we'll pass like the Rabbanon, or no, halacha even follow like Rabbi mechaverav, even a group, and therefore the halacha follow Rabbi. Okay. And therefore the Gemara of Amram Nachman says, Nachman Amarav, Asr lasos k'direi Rebbe. Okay, so Rav Nachman a little more equivocal and says it is asr to paskin like Rebbe, which means again I will say, which means that in the case of appreciation that comes on its own to the estate after the death of the father, Bachar will not get pishnayim. Kasavar he holds halacha k'Rebbe mechavero v'lo mechaverav. So he obviously holds that the halacha follows Rebbe only when Rebbe disputes someone else, but not when Rebbe disputes a group. Rav Nachman didei amar mutar lasos k'divrei Rebbe. Rav Nachman himself felt that halacha l'maisa you can paskin like Rebbe if you want to. Kasavar halacha k'Rebbe mechavero v'afilu mechaverav. So apparently, so remember again, there's Rav Nachman in the name of Rav. Rav Nachman in the name of Rav says, he's quoting Rav. Rav paskins, you cannot paskin like Rebbe, because since Rebbe is disputing a majority opinion, Rabbanon, therefore the halacha follows the majority. Rav Nachman himself felt that you're allowed to paskin like Rebbe, because the halacha follows Rebbe even when he's disputing a group. Amar Rava, Rava says, Aser lasos k'divrei Rebbe. Right? So Rava says, it is aser to paskin like Rebbe, v'im asa asay. But if he did, it's fine. Right? So what is that? What is that? Kasavar matin itmar. He says like this. He says at the end of the day, essentially at the end of the day, the halacha is that when Rebbe disputes a majority, the halacha follows the majority. However, again, Rava himself feels that the halacha really seems to point in the direction of Rebbe. So therefore, ideally, do not paskin like Rebbe. But if you did end up paskin like Rebbe, it's fine. Okay. So we'll say. So again, you begin to see how profound this machlokes is, right? So all this, now we have the machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanon, and now all of these sub-machlokes about how do we paskin, like Rabbi or like the Rabbanon. Okay, so still on Rizal, Tani Rav Nachman, B'shar Sifri Debei Rav, B'chol asher yimatzeh lo. So we'll say, so the pasuk says, remember again by Pishnayim, that the Bechar goes ahead and gets a double portion. B'chol asher yimatzeh lo, which literally means in anything that is found to be with the father. That is found to be with the father. So what does this mean? Prat l'shevach sheshpichu yarshin la'achar misas adiyan. This comes to exclude any improvements that the inheritors themselves make. So we'll say, so again, I want to point out over here, everyone is going to agree with this statement, right? Our machlokes Rabbi and the Rabbanon is in which case, where there is appreciation that occurs on its own. Everyone is agreeing that if after the death of the father, the sons, all of them, some of them, invest money to improve the estate, that the Bechar does not share in that appreciation. That everyone agrees with. So that's what it means. B'chol asher yimatzeh lo. What does the Bechar get? What does he get a double portion in? Anything that is found in the possession of the father at the time of his death. What does this come to exclude? Any improvements made by the Yarshim after the death of the father, halacha l'maisa, are not included in the Pishnayim. Aval, shevach sheshavchu nechasim la'achar misas avi and shakal. But however, again, if there is any de facto appreciation, right, just some appreciation that occurs just by itself, then the Bechar will go ahead and share in that. Money. Whose opinion is that? Rebbe. That's Rebbe. Tani Rabbi. So Rabbi Rachama taught Bishar Sifrei Debei Rav B'chol asher yimatzeh lo. The pasuk says that the Bechar gets Pishnayim in anything that is found in the possession of the father at the time of his death. Prat l'shevach sheshavchu nechasim la'achar misas avihan. That refers to any that excludes any appreciation that occurs to the estate after the death of the father. B'chol shekain shevach sheshbichu yarshin li'achar misas avihan. And all the more so, if the heirs themselves actively improve the estate, then Allah certainly the Bechar won't get to share in it. The lo shakol umanu, and whose opinion is that? Rabbi? That's the Rabbanon. Okay, so just two more brises, one supporting Rabbi, one supporting the Rabbanon. Rabbi Shmuel, ein Bechar notal pishnayim b'milva. Okay. So what's this? Now remember again, the Gemara mentioned this the opposite way on Amud Aleph as a davar pashat. Now we see it's not a davar pashat. So Rabbi said name of Shmuel. A Bechar does not get a double portion in a loan. So for example, Avraham before he died lent $1 million to Ruvain. So now the loan is, Avraham died, now the loan is coming due. So now again, Avraham has two sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. Yitzchak's a Bechar. So now comes along with the same Shmuel. Yitzchak the Bechar will not get a double portion in that loan. So Laman, whose opinion does that reflect? So the Gemara says, Ilay Mel Rabbanon. So if you want to say it's according to the Rabbanon, Hashda Shivcha Di'isei B'Reshusi Am Rabbanon Lo Shakil Melva Mebai. I will say, it's obvious that according to the Rabbanon, right? Because remember again, the Rabbanon hold that even property that's in possession of Avraham at the time that he died, and that property improves on its own afterwards, the Rabbanon say that the Bechar doesn't get Pishnayim. All the more so, a loan which is not in the possession of Avraham at the time of his death, certainly a Bechar doesn't get Pishnayim. Elul Rebbe. So that, interestingly enough, it must be reflecting the view of Rebbe. Who? Okay, let's analyze this. What about what we learned before? Yarshu shtarchov. What's right? This was the brayso we had in Amud Aleph. What was the brayso? Yarshu shtarchov. If the children inherit alone, Bechar notal pishnayim bein b'milva bein b'ribis. The Rabbi says obviously this is talking about a permitted interest transaction, right? What's an example of a permitted interest transaction? To a non-Jew. Right, a Jew is allowed to lend interest to lend money with interest to a non-Jew. Right, so now let's say again, so Avraham went ahead and Avraham lent $1 million to Joe, right? Joe the Gentile, right? And now again, that loan is coming due, and he lent him again with 5% interest. So now the loan is coming due. When the loan comes due, ultimately again, so the Brisa says that the Bechar, right? The Bechar nota pishnayim bein b'milva bein b'ribis. He gets pishnayim both in the principal and interest. So who's that? Who's that? So money. Lo Rebbe v'lo Rabbanon. So I'll say, so now you're telling me that everyone agrees that a Bechar doesn't get pishnayim in a loan. But now we have a brayso that says that a Bechar does get pishnayim in a loan. So is he reflecting it? To which the Gemara says, no. The Olam Rabbanon. Wow. So I'll say, in fact, it is the position of the Rabbanon. Now watch this. Ve'itzterich, you need this statement. Why? Sa'alayt chamina milva kevan dinakit shtara kiman degavya dami. So I'll say, interesting, like this. In fact, it is the opinion of the Rabbanon that a Bechar does not get pishnayim in a loan. Rebbe will hold that a Bechar does get pishnayim in a loan. So we'll say, so again, why do I need a brayso to teach me that according to the Rabbanon, a Bechar doesn't get pishnayim in a loan? There's a good reason. Because we'll say, why? It's what we said about Ranam Aleph. I would have thought that even the Rabbanon agree that a Bechar does get pishnayim in a loan. Why? Because since the loan is recorded in a document, maybe it's as if what? It's already collected. Maybe that satisfies the criteria, Bechol Asher Yimatzei Lo, right? Since at the time that Avraham died, Avraham had the loan document. So maybe halachically, that loan is considered to be as if it is already collected. And therefore, halach lamaisa, again, Bechar should be entitled to pishnayim. Kamash Malon, no. Kamashlan that halacha lemaisa. No, again, we'll say kamashlan according to the Rabbanon. According to the Rabbanon, even though there's a loan document, it's not considered to be collected. Therefore, again, that's appreciation or anything that comes after the death of the father. And according to the Rabbanon, Bechar does not get pishnayim in that. So, we'll say, just want to point out over here. So, just to keep track of all this stuff, right? So, we have our general machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rebbe about halacha l'maisa. So does a Bechar get pishnayim, an appreciation that occurs after the death of the father? The Rabbanon, no. Rebbe, yes. Rabbanon, no, because it's a matana. Rebbe, yes, because the chelik of the Bechar is like the chelik of the pashut. Now there's many different appendages to this. What about loans? Listen, this is very halacha l'maisa stuff, right? Does a Bechar get pishnayim in a loan that comes due after the death of Ruvain? So again, Rabbanon, no. Rebbe, yes. And you have to go, I already say Rabbanon, no, because even though, again, the loan is secured by a document, I would have thought it's already collected. Like it's collected, Kamash loan it's not. Okay? Shalchum, there was one more piece I will start for today. Shalchum mitam. They sent from there, Bechar, no tel pishnayim b'mil, v'halo b'ribis. Another brayso. Alright, let's listen to this. So fascinating. Another statement. They sent from there that a Bechar gets pishnayim in the loan, but not in the ribis, not in the interest. So the Gemara says, who is that? Leman. So we'll say it can't be according to the Rabbanon. Why? Hashda shivcha di isei bershusei amri Rabbanon delo shakil milva miboy. So we'll say according to the Rabbanon. Remember again, the Rabbanon, the Bechar is not even getting the share and appreciation that occurs the property that is already held by the estate, right? So in other words, we'll say, remember again, according to the Rabbanon, like I said, let's just use the first example. Ruvain died; he left behind the pregnant cow. The cow's there. The cow gives birth. The Rabbanan say the Bechar doesn't share in that calf. He doesn't get pishnayim in the calf. So that's already property held by the estate at the time that the father dies. It goes without saying that Bechar is not getting any pishnayim in any loans that are coming due afterwards. Ella l'Rebbe. Rather, it has to be Rebbe. But one second. But according to Rebbe, why would the Bechar not share in the ribis, in the interest? El Rebbe, or the Rebbe ribis low. According to Rebbe, the Bechar doesn't get to share in the ribis. So Gemara says, "V'hatanya," but we learned. Rebbe Omer, Bechar nota pishnayim bein b'milva bein b'ribis. But Rebbe knows it. It's fascinating, right? But the Brisa says Rebbe holds that a Bechar gets pishnayim both in principle and in interest. So the Gemara says, "Olam Rabbananu." Rather, it must be that it's the Rabbanon umilva. Kiman de Gavya Damya. Wow. So we'll say, okay, your head is spinning already from all this. Right? So we'll say, so apparently the Brisa says, no. The Brisa says the Rabbanon. And according to this approach in the Brisa, the Rabbanon hold a Bechar does get pishnayim in a loan. Right? Why does he get pishnayim in a loan? Because since it's secured by a document, it's as if it has already been collected. It's as if it's already been collected. Right? But we'll say, but halacha l'maisa, interestingly enough, he won't. So according to this approach, right? According to the Rabbanan, a Bechar gets pishnayim in the principle. Why? Because again, it's secured by a document, and because it's secured by a document, it's as if it's already owned, but it doesn't get Pishnaim in the ribbis. Now, why doesn't it get Pishnaim in the ribbis? If you take a quick look at the Rashbam says, "V'alo b'ribbis," it's in the short lines, right before 5 lines before it gets wide. Afa pisha kasav b'shtar umilva kiman de gavi adami holav v'nakit shtar aval ribbis avagav v'nakit shtar ukvar over azman mishameis aviv lo de'ein lecha roi kazeh davar shalo haya shalomi olam. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. And this is so fascinating. According to this approach, okay, get ready for this. Hold on, just give me literally 2 more minutes, and then you have the rest of your Sunday on your own. Right, so let's do this, right? So the Rabbanan say like this. A loan principle is considered to be owned by the estate. Why? Because Lamaisa, it is secured by a document. Not only that, the principal money was owned by Avraham before he died. Right? Remember again, Avraham went ahead and lent Joe the Gentile $1 million. Right? So Avraham had $1 million, and he lent it to someone. So therefore, again, interesting. Now, again, that loan is secured by a document. So even the Rabbanan will agree that is as if it's owned by the estate at the time that Avraham dies. Ribis, on the other hand, right, the interest, that's roi. That's total roi. Right? That money was never owned by Avraham. Right? It is something that is owed to the estate. So because it's roi, and therefore it was never in the possession of Avraham to begin with, the Rabbanan will say a Bachar doesn't get Pishnayim in that. Isn't that fascinating? So therefore, again, both sides. So now, a machlokes in the machlokes about the machlokes, right? Because again, we have our overarching machlokes, Rabbi the Rabbanan, about what does he get Pishnayim in? Now, if we kind of bring it down in the world of loans, does a Bachar get Pishnayim in a loan that comes due after the death of his father? So now we have a machlokes in the machlokes. Rabbi, the good news is, Rabbi says yes. The Rabbanon, it's a machlokes. First opinion about the Rabbanon is no. Second opinion about the Rabbanon is that Allah Lamaisa what? That Allah Lamaisa, again, the Bachar will get Pishnayim in the principal, but will not get Pishnayim in the interest. So I'll say, I'll just mention something interesting about this. You know, all of this is about what does a Bachar get? Right? So again, everyone agrees that a Bachar gets Pishnayim in everything that the father owned at the time of his death. The shaila is, does a Bachar have the ability to acquire things that are not yet in the active possession of the estate? So just thinking about this, what does the Kadosh Baruch Hu call us? Kadosh Baruch Hu calls Klal Yisrael B'ni B'chori Yisrael. B'ni B'chori Yisrael. So we'll say, so as a Bachar, what are we entitled to? And I'll say, perhaps, again, we don't know how we pass in halacha l'maisa, but if at least hashkafa l'maisa, we pass in like Rebbe, which means that a Bachar pretty much shares in any appreciation. That means that what we could accomplish as the Bachar of the Ribbono Shel Olam is infinite. What we could acquire for ourselves, what we could acquire for our mishpachos, what we could make of ourselves, there's no limit. Because the estate is unlimited. The estate is not limited to what there is right in front of us now, but the estate continues to appreciate. The state of the Ribbono Shel Olam is limitless. And as the Bachar of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at least Hashkafa L'maisa, if we paskin like Rebbe, even Mechavirav, that means a Bachar pretty much participates in all appreciation. As the Bachar of the Ribbono Shel Olam, that means that Kiviyachol, we have access to the entire estate of Abba. And the entire estate of Abba, the entire estate of the Ribbono Shel Olam, is without limit, it is without boundaries. And as the Bachar, that means they're both saying, as much as we want to acquire for ourselves, that opportunity is right in front of us. What an incredible Gemara to begin. It's not the new year. We've already been a couple of weeks into the new year, but it feels like the new year, right? This is the first week ahead of us without a Yom Tov. It was like, do you know the godless of coming, right? It feels like it's been Yom Tov for the last like 4.5 years, right. But Lamaisa, so now we come to a week where there's no Yom Tov during the week. So we'll say, what do you do? What do you do in a week where there's no Yom Tov in the middle? The answer is very simple. You make every day into a Yom Tov. How do you make every day into a Yom Tov? So the Daf always proactively answers all of our questions. How do you make every day into a yontiv? Dip into your inheritance. If somebody were to call you up today and tell you, you know what, you have a distant relative who passed away. I use distance so that there shouldn't be any sour with it. You have a distant relative who passed away, right? You'd say like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. And if somebody were to tell you, but that distant relative was a multi-millionaire, and everything he had belongs to you. Everything he had belongs to you. What would you be doing? I mean, you'd want to contain your excitement a little bit because you don't want to look weird to the person on the other line, right? But lamaisa, you'd be making a tova hanativ. That's the halacha, right? When somebody dies and leaves you an inheritance, you make a dayana emes, and if you inherit, you also make the bracha of tova hanativ. Somebody would tell you that, you would be overwhelmed. Sheba says, so kiviyachol, here's what we have. We have the inheritance and no one died. Right? The inheritance comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where the Bechar of the Ribbon Shalom, and no one died. Right? No one was harmed in the making of this inheritance. Right? So Lamaisa again, and it's inheritance without boundaries, Balim Mitzarim. So we'll say that's a yontiv. The greatest inheritance of all time is right at our fingertips. All it requires of us is to dip into it, to take from it, and to utilize it. And when you have an inheritance like that never gets depleted, that is constantly replenished, every single day is a yontiv. We'll stop over here for today. We'll continue tomorrow. Shkayach, everyone.